Let's pick up again on a story we've been reporting, because in the past half hour, President Trump has announced that he says he sacked his national security advisor, John Bolton. In a tweet on social media, Mr. Trump said he disagreed strongly with many of Mr. Bolton's suggestions, as did others in the administration, and I informed him his services were no longer required. I asked him for his resignation, which was given to me this morning. I thank John for his service. I'll be naming a new advisor next week. So that's the essence of what he was saying. Mr. Bolton himself has wanted to clarify things. He's been saying that I offered to resign last night, and President Trump said, let's talk about it tomorrow. And I should say, too, that there have been plenty of other comments on social media from journalists in the US who say that Mr. Bolton has been texting them and communicating with them directly. For example, Robert Costa saying that Ambassador Bolton sent me a text message just now. Let's be clear, I resigned. I offered to do so last night. And then Liz Power, another US journalist, saying, John Bolton just texted me just now. He's watching the coverage that they were doing. He said, let's be very clear, I resigned. So clearly a bit of a battle of the news lines there. Phyllis Bennett is joining us, who's from the independent foreign policy think tank, the Institute for Policy Studies in Washington. Phyllis, thank you so much for joining us. What's gone on here, do you think? What led to this?
I think that it's probably true that Bolton resigned before, and then Trump tried to reclaim it and say, you don't resign, I'm going to fire you. There has been serious disagreements between the two for quite some time. Bolton is an unreconstructed supporter of one thing, which is going to war for regime change. He supported bombing Iran, he supported bombing North Korea, regime change in both. He was one of the main factors behind Trump's decision to reverse the moves towards normalization with Cuba. He was the one pushing for the attempted coup in Venezuela. So he has been the harshest of the hawkish voices within the Trump administration. He hasn't been able to get as much support from Trump ultimately for his positions as he hoped. And I think that after the disagreements over Iran and North Korea, for example, when President Trump went to South Korea and then suddenly announced he was going to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and step over the line into North Korean territory. In anticipation of that, Bolton had already said, I'm not even going to go with you. I'm going to go off on another trip somewhere else. That's kind of unprecedented for the National Security Advisor not to accompany the president. But they had very serious disagreements, although both used very strong militaristic language. For Trump, it was much more asserting what he thought his base wanted to hear. He has pulled back from the brink on a number of occasions because he also has been trying politically to be able to pull out troops from various places where they are in harm's way, whether in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and elsewhere. So this notion that his administration's top security advisor, the National Security Advisor, Bolton, who has historically been against diplomacy, against international institutions. I remember well in a debate with me 25 years ago when he condemned the United Nations, his definition of U.S. first, which of course is Trump's position, is much more U.S. military first. And that's not how Trump comes to it. So he hasn't been able to have as much influence as I think he wanted. And the last straw was probably the debacle over the last couple of days of the end of the talks, the U.S. talks with the Taliban, and the meeting at Camp David being canceled, the meeting that Trump was claiming to have planned, where he would meet both with the Taliban and with the Afghan leadership. The irony here, of course, is that in his short term at the United Nations, which was a very unsuccessful term during George W. Bush's years, during the early years of the Iraq War, Bolton was then replaced by Zalmay Khalilzad, the current special envoy to Afghanistan, who had arranged the talks with the Taliban that may well have led to the final break between Trump and Bolton.
Just a thought about the appointment of Mr. Bolton in the first place, because, as you say, his track record is clear. His values in terms of diplomacy are clear. So the president knew full well what he was getting by appointing John Bolton. Is it surprising, therefore, that it's turned out like this?
Not really, because I think it would be a mistake to assume that Trump had appointed Bolton because of some strategic decision about the value of Bolton's positions. I think it was much more a rejection of his earlier, Mike Kelly, his first national security advisor, and other people in his early cabinet who were widely reported as serving as a brake on the president's impetuousness, on the president's tendencies to send troops or to be more militaristic. And he wanted people around him who, number one, were not going to challenge him, and number 2, 3, 4, and 5 were not going to be reported as challenging him. So one of the things that this president clearly cannot tolerate is somebody in and around his circles who's getting more attention than he is. And on some of these issues, Bolton was getting just too much publicity for a president like Trump to tolerate. So I think that was part of his thinking. From Bolton's vantage point, I think his view was probably that he was not able to have as much influence as he hoped, that Trump was not following his advice. And so at a certain point, he says, okay, if you're not going to follow my advice, I'm out of here.
Phyllis, very interesting to talk to you, and thank you so much for your analysis on that. Good to talk to you. Phyllis Bennis there for us, talking to us from Washington there. Thanks to her. Time is 5 to 6, and BBC News at 6 coming up very soon with Fiona, and I'll be back at 10. But Lucy's here with the weather. Hi, Lucy.
Thanks, Hugh. Hello. We've seen some glimmers of blue sky at times through the day today, but we have got something wetter and windier to come as we move through tonight. It's courtesy of an area of low pressure. It's passing towards the north and west. The associated weather fronts gradually pushing south and east, bringing some rain and also some windier conditions for a time as we move through tonight and into Wednesday. So through tonight, some heavy persistent rain for a time for northwest parts of Scotland in particular. Gusts around 50 miles per hour possible here on exposed spots. There will be outbreaks of rain gradually working south and east as we move through the night. The initial first weather front and then the second one following on behind. Behind the weather fronts, though, starting to see some clearer spells feeding into the far northwest with 1 or 2 isolated showers, and the temperatures staying in the double figures, so milder for most than we saw last night. As we move into tomorrow, then tomorrow starts off with some cloud and patchy outbreaks of rain gradually pushing south and east across England and Wales. Brighter skies for Scotland, Northern Ireland will then gradually feed their way in as we move through the day. The risk of a few sharp showers for Northern Ireland, Scotland, northwest England, and it will be a blustery day. Gusts around 30 to 40 miles per hour quite widely. A touch higher though for northwest Scotland, and the temperatures reaching a maximum of around 21 degrees Celsius. Here's how it looks as we move into Thursday. The next area of low pressure waiting in the wings is going to work its way in from the west as we move into Thursday. So Thursday will bring further wet weather at times. We're also going to drag in this more humid air in the south and east. So we will see things turning increasingly humid, but also the temperatures picking up here as well. So here's how it looks on Thursday. Outbreaks of rain for a time for Scotland, Northern Ireland, then pushing into northwest England, parts of Wales. Driest in the south and east, and it will be quite humid feeling here with highs around 23, 24 degrees Celsius. And then as we move towards the end of the week, we'll start to see high pressure pushing in. So more in the way of dry weather to come. There will be a few weather fronts though just to the far north, and that's going to bring some cloud and also the greater chance of seeing some outbreaks of rain. So through Friday and into the weekend, we're looking at more in the way of dry and fine weather. The temperatures will pick up as well. So by the time we get to Sunday, we're looking at highs around 25 degrees Celsius in the southeast. So a good deal of dry and fine weather to come as we move towards the end of the week.
At 6:30, Sports Day will have the latest sports news. Then at 7, The View from Washington in Beyond 100 Days.
When the weather can't decide what to do, you still can. To know what's coming, check the BBC Weather app.
The Hamatura Monastery in Lebanon is home to 18 Greek Orthodox monks. They reveal the personal journeys which brought them here, far from the outside world. Our World, The Good Struggle, Saturday and Sunday, 9:30 p.m. on the BBC News Channel.
In a world of complex complex global news stories, we'll sift through the information to bring you what matters most. And with reaction and reporting in real time,
our immigration laws are a laughingstock all over the world.
You'll know what's happening around the world as we do.
And that these new measures won't actually stop Venezuelans from coming over, it will just make the migrant crisis worse.
Whatever the story, we'll piece it together on Outside Source. Join me, Ros Atkins, tonight at 9 on the BBC News Channel.
Our work is clever, it's truthful, it's new.
How do you thank someone for saving your son's life?
Life. Beyond our imagination.
Just look at that. I think you'll agree that that's a pretty complicated motion.
Wow.
Celebrating 50 years since the OU opened up education to everyone. The Open University, bringing learning to life.